I now call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's committee meeting. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. The meeting record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members may submit any materials that they wish to be included therein. There are 3 items that we have on our docket today. First, H.R. 634, eliminating the Election Assistance Commission. Second, H.R. 133, eliminating the Presidential Election Campaign Fund. And finally, Committee Resolution 115-4, the committee's views and estimates on the fiscal year 2018. Our first measure, H.R. 634, ends the Election Assistance Commission. H.R. 634 transfers the Election Assistance Commission's few remaining functions to the Federal Election Commission. It is my firm belief that the EAC has outlived its usefulness and purpose. When first created after the 2000 election, the EAC was established to distribute money to states to upgrade voting machines and make improvements to election processes. Early on, the EAC distributed more than $3.1 billion to states for these purposes. However, over the last several years, the EAC has yet to receive additional funding. Notwithstanding the lack of resources, the temporary agency remains. Most of its functions have come to a close, and those remaining are easily transferable to the Federal Election Commission. Almost all of its mandated reports have been issued. The EAC's testing and certification program for voting machines is for the most part unused. For the past several years, the EAC has had so little substantive responsibility, it has spent more than half its budget on overhead expenses. It is time for the EAC to be officially ended. The next measure we will consider is H.R. 133, which eliminates the Presidential Election Campaign Fund altogether. In the 113th Congress, I introduced the Gabriella Miller Kids First Research Act. This important bill, which was later enacted, redirected millions of dollars in taxpayer money away from political parties' national conventions and put it toward enhancing pediatric research based upon collaboration. Today, we will consider H.R. 133, introduced by Representative Tom Cole, which eliminates the Presidential Election Campaign Fund altogether and uses the return funds to supplement the 10-year Pediatric Research Initiative Fund to fight childhood diseases and reduce the federal deficit. In 2008, Barack Obama became the first candidate to reject the use of this funding for the general election, opting instead to use privately raised funds. Since then, no major primary candidate nor party presidential nominee has accepted general election grants. It is clear that this fund is antiquated and no longer in step with taxpayers making their own decisions to support a candidate. These funds can and should be used for a greater purpose. The last item before us is Committee Resolution 115-4, the committee's views and estimates of the fiscal year 2018. The Congressional Budget Act of 1974 requires congressional committees to submit to the Committee on the Budget their views and estimates of federal programs that will have a significant budgetary impact. The committee will continue its work to conduct oversight and identify future potential savings at the Federal Election Commission. One way to reduce the budget needs of the FEC is to eliminate the Presidential Election Campaign Fund, which will be accomplished by one of the measures before us today. Lastly, the committee supports the House's work on coordinating cybersecurity practices and policies across the legislative branch. As an institution, we must work to be in step with today's technology and work hard to protect data that we rely on each and every day. I would now like to recognize my colleague and the committee's ranking member, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, despite its important mission, this is the latest of many repeated attempts to abolish the Election Assistance Commission. I have opposed these efforts in the past, and I oppose them again today. The EAC is the only federal agency charged with making elections more fair, accurate, accessible, and efficient. Election administrators across the country faced extraordinary challenges during the 2016 election when hackers tried to assess voter registration database in more than 20 states. And the United States Senate Select Intelligence Committee recently launched a bipartisan investigation into foreign interference in the presidential election. The EAC provided key support to states and municipalities facing these unprecedented difficulties, and it will continue to do so as they prepare for the next election. This is a time when we should be focusing on strengthening the only federal agency charged with making elections work for all Americans, not trying to eliminate it. And I will also have an amendment to do just that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. I now ask if any other member of the committee wishes to be recognized for the purpose of providing an opening statement. First on the Republican side, Democratic side.
If I might. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, most democratic countries on earth have a federal election commission, a national election commission that oversees the integrity and the honesty of the vote count and deals with all of the manifold problems that present themselves in the election system. We have just the Federal Election Commission, which is focused just on campaign finance and whose dysfunction is infamous. The Election Assistance Commission was an attempt to bring some modernization and focus to our electoral process. And so, you know, I would prefer if we went in the other direction and we doubled down on it. We really tried to deal with the repeated assaults on people's voting rights and the lack of uniformity and the chaos that often afflicts our elections. So with that, I guess I'll just say I'm very open to listening to the critique of the Election Assistance Commission. Maybe there are things that we can do to reform it, to bolster it, to make it more effective. But I think that simply disbanding it at this point sends completely the wrong message about our commitment to integrity and uniformity in our elections. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. Any other members wish to be heard? I would now call up and lay before the committee H.R. 634, a bill to eliminate the Election Assistance Commission. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with and the bill is considered read and open for amendment. Would any member like to make a statement or an amendment? Mr. Brady.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment of the nature of a substitute.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The EAC was created by my friend, our Democratic Whip, Steny Hoyer. And on a bipartisan basis after the 2000 election, it has made significant progress toward improving elections administrations across the country over the past 15 years. The EAC provides local and state election officials with best practices, information, and voting machine certifications, and other critical support. Last year, the Commission Be Ready 16 effort helped more than 8,000 independently operating election jurisdictions in the country preparing for Election Day. At a time when elections administrations are facing serious difficulties, from threats from foreign hackers to outdated and failing voting machines, it is critical that the EAC is equipped with the tools it needs. That's why I urge my colleagues on this committee to support this amendment to reauthorize the EAC until 2022. The amendment also provides necessary funding for requirements payments to states to be used for the upgrading of security of voter registration process and database, and requires the EAC to undertake an assessment of its own cybersecurity and IT systems. These provisions will ensure that both states, federal elections administrators, are in a position to adequately guard against attempted foreign influence in our elections. The EAC needs reformed, not replaced, and my amendment does just that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized on the offered amendment? Ms. Lofgren, you're recognized.
I just want to speak in favor of Mr. Brady's amendment. You know, thinking back to the creation of the Election Assistance Commission, this wasn't a Democratic plan and it wasn't a Republican plan. It was a bipartisan effort. Why? Because we all knew that there were problems with the administration of elections, the election in 2000 was a mess. And rather than just worry about it, we worked together, Democrats and Republicans, to put together this commission. Now, it's not perfect, and I think Mr. Brady's amendment does some important things to improve it. But to think that in light of the information we've received, that databases are being attacked by Russia, that we have potential cyber holes in some of our voting systems, and at a time when some in politics are casting doubt on the integrity of the voting system itself. Now is not the time to do away with the only entity at the federal level that is obliged to try and secure the system itself, not for an outcome, just for the integrity of the voting system. I think that Mr. Brady's amendment makes important improvements, but the important thing is it wouldn't eliminate the Election Assistance Commission. For the life of me, I really don't understand what the rush is, what the impetus is to eliminate instead of repair and reform this important effort. So I hope that we can support Mr. Brady's amendment and do so on a bipartisan basis, as we did when the commission itself was created. And with that, I would yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized on the offered amendment?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Raskin, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I do add my voice in support of the ranking member's amendment in the nature of a substitute. We've just come out of a presidential election which has been roundly criticized on all sides for various inadequacies and problems that arose. 16 intelligence agencies of the United States, our entire intelligence community, issued a report demonstrating, at least to my satisfaction, that there was a deliberate campaign of cyber sabotage, espionage, fake news, and propaganda directed at the presidential campaign by Vladimir Putin and agents of the Russian government from Moscow. President Trump himself has said that there were 3 to 4 million fraudulent votes cast. And there have been criticisms in a number of the states of various legal changes that have taken place. Those changes actually took place in the context of the Supreme Court's 5-4 ruling in Shelby County versus Holder, which removed the heart of the Voting Rights Act by essentially emasculating the pre-clearance requirement which had been in place for 50 years. So this was the first presidential election in a half-century where we did not have the advanced protections of the Voting Rights Act for the pre-clearance of changes taking place at the state level. And so I think it would send a dangerous message to the people of the United States and to the world for us now to essentially abolish the only federal agency we have tasked with looking at the problems in our election system. And I think that the ranking member's idea of reforming the Election Assistance Commission, dealing with whatever problems have come up, makes a lot more sense than simply scrapping it altogether. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. Any other members wishing to be heard on this amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered to H.R. 634. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. In the opinion of the chair, the nays have it and the motion is not agreed to. Any other amendments? Recorded vote has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
Nay.
Mr. Davis votes nay. Mrs. Comstock?
Nay.
Mrs. Comstock votes nay. Mr. Walker?
Nay.
Mr. Walker votes nay. Mr. Smith?
Nay.
Mr. Smith votes nay. Mr. Loudermilk?
Nay.
Mr. Loudermilk votes nay. Mr. Brady?
Aye.
Mr. Brady votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Yes.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Chairman Harper?
Nay.
Chairman Harper votes no. The ayes 3, noes 6.
The nays have it and the amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Ms. Lofgren is recognized for the purpose of presenting an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment. As I indicated earlier, I think it's a big mistake to
The
eliminate,
amendment is considered as read.
thank you, to eliminate the commission itself. But if that is the intent of the majority, it seems that we should not do that until at least until the EAC has completed a very important function, and that is administering the payments to states to allow them to upgrade their state voter registration databases and processes. This is a critical task, and particularly in light of the attempted breaches of 20 state voter registration databases last year. The EAC is the only federal agency tasked with improving election administration. It's in a unique position to provide this important support to the states. And I think that even if the majority believes the commission should go away, this task needs to be completed first. You know, we have, you know, we're lucky in California. Our Secretary of State is also an electrical engineer and a computer-savvy guy. He's really taken hold of this, but that is variable among the states. And to think that although there's no evidence that the actual vote totals were tampered with by foreign aggressors, cyber aggressors, there is evidence of attempts to manipulate the voter registration database. It would be a mistake for us to think that you couldn't affect the outcome of an election in that way. And it could go either way. I mean, you could go and take a profile of individuals who are likely to vote Republican and mess with their registrations. Or likewise, you could do the same thing to voters who are likely to vote Democrat. You could affect the impact, you could outcome of an election by manipulating the database. And so it's really, really important that all of the states have their database security in place. Some are ahead of others, but the EAC is in a key role to provide that assistance. So let's let them finish that. Even if you don't like, and I don't understand why, you don't like the other activities, it would really be a big, big mistake to eliminate this before that function is accomplished. So that is my amendment. I hope that we can agree to do this, and with that, I would yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. Are there any other members who wish to be heard on this amendment? Mr. Brady, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I support Ms. Lofgren's amendment. We can't expect our local election officials to be cybersecurity experts, nor should they have to confront foreign governments trying to undermine our elections. This amendment supports them, and I hope that our colleagues will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any other members wishing to be heard on this?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Raskin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I also support this and think it's absolutely essential if we're going to proceed with dissolving the Election Assistance Commission. Again, we all know the election that we just came out of. We know the findings of the intelligence agencies of the United States. We certainly don't want to turn a blind eye to the fact that there was cyber sabotage, cyber espionage, an attempt to derail the electoral process of the world's first great democracy. And I think it's a very small concession on the part of the majority simply to say that we should upgrade the security of the state's voter registration lists and voter registration processes before we simply disband the whole process. And I hope that we would all be able to agree on a bipartisan basis that's something we can do. We've also learned that there continue to be a number of problems bedeviling the voter registration process. This came out, of course, after the president asserted that there were millions of fraudulent votes cast, and it turns out that there are lots of people affiliated with the Trump administration who are multiply registered in different states: Steve Bannon, Tiffany Trump, Sean Spicer, Jared Kushner, Steve Mnuchin. And that's not out of any act of malevolence on that part. It's simply because we're dealing with creaky and obsolescent systems that need to be reformed. And that was the whole genesis behind the Election Assistance Commission in the first place. They obviously have not finished their work in a number of areas, but certainly not in this most critical area. And I do hope that all of us would be able to support Ms. Lofgren's amendment. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. The question is now on the amendment offered by Ms. Lofgren to H.R. 634. All of those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the nays
Chairman,
have it,
may I
and the
have a
motion is not
recorded
agreed
vote?
to.
Could I have a recorded vote, please?
There has been a recorded vote requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
No.
Mr. Davis votes no. Mrs. Comstock? No. Mrs. Comstock votes no. Mr. Walker? Nay. Mr. Walker votes nay. Mr. Smith? No. Mr. Smith votes no. Mr. Loudermilk? Nay. Mr. Loudermilk votes nay. Mr. Brady? Aye. Mr. Brady votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Yes?
Ms. Lofgren votes yes. Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Chairman Harper?
Nay.
Chairman Harper votes nay. The ayes 3, nays 6.
The nays have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, I move the committee favorably report H.R. 634. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Recorded vote has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Davis votes aye. Mrs. Comstock? Aye. Mrs. Comstock votes aye. Mr. Walker? Aye. Mr. Walker votes aye. Mr. Smith? Aye. Mr. Smith votes aye. Mr. Loudermilk? Aye. Mr. Loudermilk votes aye. Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Brady votes no. Ms. Lofgren?
Nope.
Ms. Lofgren votes no. Mr. Raskin?
No.
Mr. Raskin votes no. Chairman Harper?
Aye.
Chairman Harper votes aye. The ayes 6, noes 3.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Does any member wish to submit supplemental or minority views?
Mr. Chairman, I announce that the minority will request 2 additional days provided by the House rules to submit minority views. Mr. Chairman, also announce consent for the letters of support for the EAC be entered into the record.
Pursuant to Clause 2 of Rule 11, that's without objection. Pursuant to Clause 2 of Rule 11, the member is entitled to 2 additional calendar days to file such views in writing and signed by the member and filed with the clerk of the committee. And I will also ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a 2015 resolution from the National Association of Secretaries of State reaffirming resolutions from 2005 and 2010, encouraging Congress not to reauthorize or fund the EAC. Without objection, that is submitted, entered into the record. I now call up and lay before the committee H.R. 133, the Election Assistance Commission Termination Act. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open for amendment. Would any member like to make a statement?
Mr. Chairman.
I'll first recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, public finance has played a role in our presidential elections since 1976. When the PECF was first created in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the PECF allows taxpayers to voluntarily set aside $3 to contribute to our public financing of our elections. That's what the taxpayers wanted to do with $3. That was their clear intent. Over the past 40 years, presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle have taken advantage of this funding. Now, I know that recent candidates have not used the system, but that means the system needs improvement, not repealed. My colleague, Representative David Price of North Carolina, has worked on this for years, and he has some very good ideas that the committee should consider. Campaign finance reform is undoubtedly one of the most important and pressing issues we face. Outside groups spent nearly $1.5 billion to influence the 2016 election, and the rise of anonymous unlimited corporate spending has made it increasingly difficult for individual citizens to have a voice in our elections. This is not the time to terminate the only public financing system at the federal level, but is the absolute right time to make it better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other members wish to be heard? Now recognize Mr. Davis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Harper. I want to thank you for bringing this important piece of legislation to our attention. As history has shown us, since 2008, participation by the candidates running for president has gone down. As a matter of fact, every 2016 candidate for president, every major candidate shied away from using public funds, so much so we have a balance of $317 million sitting in the presidential election campaign fund. And, Mr. Chairman Harper, your bill would take $63 million of that and put it towards fighting pediatric cancer. During my tenure as a member of Congress, I'm thrilled this committee has found a way to better appropriate the resources of the dying presidential election campaign fund. The rest of the money would go to paying down the national debt. I got to tell you, Chairman Harper, you and I have worked together on these issues, and I was personally touched by the story of one of my constituents, Johnny Wade, a courageous 8-year-old from my district who passed away tragically this past year from a rare form of brain cancer on Christmas Eve of 2015. I rallied other members during the State of the Union to wear our Team Johnny bracelets to show support for funding more pediatric cancer research. And I have worked with my colleagues to push more funds through the appropriations process. In 80% of children, when cancer is detected, it has already spread to other parts of the body. And unlike many adult cancers that can be diagnosed early, pediatric cancers are more difficult to detect. New therapies going under clinical trials at the NIH, such as CAR T-cell therapy, where a patient's T-cells are removed and engineered to fight cancer cells, are showing promise. But we need to do more to make sure that these therapies can improve and have a widespread impact to save children like Johnny Wade. And research funding for NIH, including that for the Gabriella Miller Kids First Act, can do just that. I fully support this legislation and urge my colleagues on this committee to vote yes on H.R. 133.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Are there any other members wishing to be heard on H.R. 133, the bill eliminating the presidential election campaign fund?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Comstock, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, appreciate your work that you've done on the Gabriella Miller Act. The Mark and Ellen Miller, Gabriella's parents, do live in my district, and so I appreciate that now that we have a situation where participation in this fund was exactly no major candidate over 2016, and that precedent was started in 2008. This is money that is sitting there that could be much better used for this purpose. And I appreciate the start that we made on this, and I think in the past, and I think this additional money is very much needed and will be very much appreciated on this front. In terms of the outside spending increasing, I think that's really come as a result of campaign finance reform. So however we're going to deal with campaign finance reform, and I think we all have a lot of ideas on how to do that, this fund has died of its own lack of use, and it would be much better utilized for pediatric cancer. And in fact, I might like to see more of that $317 million going towards that, but we can address that at another time. But I appreciate the work done here and support the measure.
Thank you, Ms. Comstock. Any other members wishing to be heard on this? Would any member like to offer an amendment? Seeing none, without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized? Okay, so no amendments. So if not, I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 133. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion is agreed to. And yes. Mr. Brady.
I ask that the minority will request 2 additional days provided by the House Rules to submit minority views. Mr. Chairman, I also ask unanimous consent
Mr. Brady,
for the letters.
if I may interrupt, there's a request.
Yes, I make a
Request for a recorded vote.
I'm sorry.
My apologies. Okay, so a recorded vote has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Davis votes yes. Mrs. Comstock?
Aye.
Mrs. Comstock votes aye. Mr. Smith? Aye. Mr. Smith votes aye. Mr. Latimer? Aye. Mr. Latimer votes aye. Mr. Brady? No. Mr. Brady votes no. Ms. Lofgren? No. Ms. Lofgren votes no. Mr. Raskin? No. Mr. Raskin votes no. Chairman Harper?
Aye.
Chairman Harper votes aye. The ayes 5, noes 3.
The ayes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask that the minority will request 2 additional days provided by the House Rules to submit minority views. Mr. Chairman, I also unanimous consent for the letters of support for PECF to be entered into the record. Thank you.
Without objection. I now call up and lay before the Committee Resolution 115-4, the committee's views and estimates for FY18. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the resolution is considered read and open for amendment. Would any member like to make a statement? Would any member like to offer an amendment? Without objection, the amendment, if not, no amendments, I move the committee favorably report Committee Resolution 115-4. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Mr.
I
Brady.
announce that the minority will request 2 additional days provided by the House rules to submit minority views.
Without objection. Without objection, the motion is considered laid upon the table. For all the matters considered here today, I would ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make technical and conforming changes if necessary. Without objection, so ordered. That concludes today's markup. Without objection, the markup is adjourned.